And also we are facing real kind of violence,
Yes.
Religious and communal kind of tensions. Now what is happening in Chhattisgarh against the Christians, the Adivasis, they have become Christians, and now they are facing a kind of genocidal kind of violence. And what is happening in Kerala also, plenty of examples are there. Even in Kerala, caste killings have become a norm, a kind of daily kind of experience. In South India, Tamil Nadu and Kerala also it is happening. So the dehumanization and the kind of violent kind of treatment of Dalits and also to the minorities, especially to the Muslims, and as in Chhattisgarh now to the tribal Christians, new Christians. So how do you view this minority question in India, especially after the rise of the Hindu nationalists in power? And your own idea of this Dalitization of the Muslim. Could you elaborate and comment on this kind of a serious situation in India today?
See, we are living at a time when we are ruled by the irony of the fact that the majority sees itself as the minority. Right? It's a country that's 80% Hindus, but the rhetoric is that of the dying Hindu, the rhetoric is that of the Hindu in danger, the rhetoric is that minorities have been appeased so much that they now rule the roost, they have all the power. And all of this is a deflection. It's a bit like a magician's trick, where the trick is being done here, you're now asked to look there, what is called prestidigitation. So there is a way in which the BJP has managed to create this paradigm that the Hindus are a minority, while at the same time creating a discourse which allows the continuing use of violence against the Muslims, against the Dalits. And you've seen the whole spate of incidents, whether it's the lynching of Dalits, the lynching of Muslims, which go without go without punishment. This is what V. Geeta, the feminist, called the rule of impunity in India, rather than the rule of law. And what has happened here is that in India, I think the fundamental intellectual paradigm was set in 1947, when India was partitioned on grounds of religion. So the fundamental divide at that point was seen as that between the Hindu and the Muslim, and that had to be handled through this discourse of secularism, where the state was equidistant from all religions, little taking into account the fact that the central violence in India is that of the Hindu towards the Hindu other, right? That towards the Dalit. And this has been a feature of Indian life from independence, and certainly earlier, but from 1947 onwards, this is the fact that has been reduced to mere journalism rather than social analysis. So if you look for academic studies on violence against untouchables, you'd find far fewer than there are sophisticated studies on partition, communalism, the phenomenon of communalism, like the magnificent work of Gyanendra Pandey, for example. But what is happening increasingly now is that, given the fact that the BJP now sees itself as a dominant hegemonic party, that the Muslim has been rendered the condition of the Dalit, where they have no recourse to the law. The killing of the Muslim now evokes very little attention in the press, pangs of conscience among large parts of the Indian population. They see this as a necessary process of disciplining an insubordinate minority. So I think this Dalitization of the Muslim is a philosophical idea. And in that sense, when you think about the fate, whether it's of Anand Teltumde, Father Stan Swami, you think about the people who have been indicted in the Bhima Koregaon case, they have been Dalitized in the sense that they have no recourse to the law. Okay. They are outside the law. Yeah. And there is a sovereign power enacted by the state that can just put them away in jail and, away from the rules of habeas corpus, away from the protests of civil society. And in that sense, this is something that is an endemic fact of Hinduism. Right. And which goes back to what we said earlier about Hinduism, or India being a caste democracy. India behaves to its minorities as upper castes behave towards the Dalits. And that is the central philosophical fault line on which our society is constituted.
Right. So India is also becoming a kind of shamefaced democracy, as in the case of...
I wish it were a shamefaced democracy. It's an in-your-face
right.
democracy which denies
Yeah.
the fact that it isn't one.
Okay.